The sky burned over the feudal world designated Sector 88 Beta. It was not the holy fire of industry. It was the screaming heat of atmospheric entry. The drop pods of the Imperial Reclamation Fleet slammed into the earth. They crushed the cobblestone streets of the outer districts. The mission was simple. The Departamento Munitorum had ordered the planet to be brought back into the Emperor's light. The planetary governor had refused to pay tithes for 3,000 years. The record said the population was primitive. The record said they fought with swords and crude cannons. The records were wrong. Captain Titus of the Ultramarines 4th Company stepped from the smoking wreckage of his drop pod. His bolter was raised. He scanned the smoke. He saw thatched roofs and stone walls. It looked like 1,000 other backward worlds. Then he heard the sound. It was a wet, slapping noise. It was the sound of heavy meat hitting the ground. The smoke cleared. Titus looked up. He did not see a tank. He did not see a bunker. He saw a face. The face was 15 meters in the air. It was naked skin. The creature had no reproductive organs. It had no armor. It had a smile that stretched too wide. It looked at the Space Marine. It did not know fear. Astartes are built to inspire terror. They are the angels of death. When a human sees a Space Marine, they fall to their knees. This giant did not kneel. It stepped forward. Its foot crashed through a house. The timber splintered like dry twigs. The family inside screamed. The giant reached down. Its hand was the size of a battle tank. It grabbed a screaming woman. It lifted her to its mouth. It bit her in half. Titus fired. The bolter round was a miniature rocket. It hit the giant in the chest. The explosion blew a crater in the meat. Red steam hissed out. The giant stumbled back, but it did not die. Titus watched with cold, tactical focus. The flesh began to knit together. Muscle fibers reached out like worms. The wound closed. The giant smiled again. On the radio, the Imperial Guard regiments were screaming. Colonel Hayne roared orders to his tank commanders. Lehman Russ battle tanks fired their cannons. The shells hit the horde of giants swarming the outer walls. Heads exploded. Limbs flew off. But for every giant that fell, 3 more walked over the bodies. They did not use tactics. They did not take cover. They just walked. They walked into the tank fire. They walked into the heavy bolters. They ignored their own dead. The sheer mass of bodies began to clog the streets. Magos Vetius of the Adeptus Mechanicus watched from a high ridge. His red robes fluttered in the wind. His mechadendrites clicked and whirred. He recorded the slaughter. He did not feel pity. He felt curiosity. The biology was impossible. The energy required to move such mass without mechanical aid violated the laws of physics. They generated heat. They generated steam. They appeared from nowhere. The Magos noted that the giants ignored the local wildlife. They only ate humans. They did not digest. They vomited the dead to make room for more. It was a biological engine of extermination. The catastrophe unfolded in minutes. The Imperial Guard line broke. A 15-meter giant kicked a Lehman Russ tank. The tank flipped over. The treads spun uselessly. The giant bent down and peeled the turret off like the lid of a tin can. It ate the tank commander. The morale of the guardsmen shattered. They had trained to fight rebels. They had trained to fight orcs. They had not trained to fight nightmares that looked like giant, distorted humans. Titus realized the strategic error. This was not a compliance action. This was a survival scenario. The walls of the city were not built to keep people in. They were built to keep these things out. The Imperium had breached the walls to land their troops. They had let the enemy inside. The rescue mission had become a trap. The retreat order was impossible to give. The drop pods were one-way transport. The Thunderhawk gunships could not land in the swarm. The first day of the reclamation of Sector 88 Beta was not a victory. It was a butchery. The sun set over the smoking city. The smiling giants roamed the streets. The angels of death fought back to back in the ruins. They had limited ammunition. They had no supply lines, and the enemy had no end. The collision of the 41st millennium and the Titans had begun. The Imperium was slow to learn, and the lesson was written in blood. The tactical situation in the Shiganshina district deteriorated with a speed that defied standard Imperial combat models. Captain Titus of the Ultramarines stood amidst the ruin of what had been a cobblestone market square. The air was thick with the copper scent of blood and the sulfur stink of bolter propellant. His auto senses filtered the screaming of the local populace, dampening the audio spikes to allow for clear command channel communication. The civilians were fleeing in a chaotic stampede, clogging the narrow streets, trampling one another in their desperate haste to reach the inner gate. Titus checked his ammunition counter. He had expended 40% of his primary loadout in less than 12 minutes of engagement. This was unsustainable. The enemy was biologically nonsensical. Titus watched as 3 tactical marines from his squad engaged a 15-meter specimen. Brother Leandros fired a precise burst into the creature's knee joint. The bone shattered. The giant collapsed forward, crushing a fruit cart. In any standard engagement, a mobility kill was a prelude to execution. But as Leandros moved to flank, the giant's leg began to steam. The flesh bubbled. The bone knit itself back together with a wet, snapping sound. In seconds, the creature was pushing itself back up. It did not scream, did not show pain. It merely turned its head toward Leandros, its wide, skinless smile fixed, and lunged with a clumsy, grasping hand. Leandros rolled clear, his ceramite armor scraping sparks against the stone. He brought his chainsaw down in a sweeping arc, severing the giant's fingers. The severed digits fell to the ground and began to evaporate into steam. This observation was critical. Titus logged it immediately. The biomass did not remain stable after separation from the main host. It sublimated. This suggested the creatures were not purely biological, but sustained by some form of esoteric energy field or warp sorcery, though the librarian attached to the fleet had reported no psychic fluctuation. Colonel Hayne of the Cadian 81st Regiment was losing his mind and his men. The Imperial Guard had set up a firing line along the main avenue. Lehman Russ battle tanks, the pride of the Astra Militarum, were parked hull down behind hastily erected barricades of rubble. When the Titans flooded through the broken outer gate, the order was given to fire at will. The first volley was devastating. Battle cannons roared, sending high explosive shells into the mass of smiling faces. Bodies exploded in showers of red mist. The front rank of the Titan horde was vaporized. The cheer that went up from the guardsmen was cut short. Through the smoke and the steam of the dissolving dead, more Titans walked. They stepped on the vaporizing remains of their kin. They did not slow down. A 10-meter class Titan, missing half its head from a Lascanon shot, continued to walk forward while its skull regrew. The brain tissue reformed before the eyes of the horrified troopers. The fear response in the unaugmented humans was immediate and catastrophic. Discipline held for exactly 3 minutes. Then the Titans reached the barricades. A Titan, with an abnormally large jaw, bit into the barrel of a Lehman Russ. The metal groaned and bent. The Titan lifted the 60-ton tank as if it were a toy. Inside, the crew screamed. The Titan threw the tank into a bell tower. The ammunition cook-off created a fireball that illuminated the district. The guardsmen broke. They dropped their laser guns and ran. They ran toward the canal, toward the boats, toward anywhere that was away from the eating mouths. Colonel Haynes shot 2 of his own fleeing sergeants to restore order, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. The command structure had dissolved. High above the slaughter, Magos Vetius floated on a gravity suspensor platform, flanked by 4 combat servitors. He was safe from the Titan's reach, hovering at an altitude of 30 meters. His optic sensors zoomed and focused, recording every death with dispassionate clarity. He watched a Titan swallow a guardsman whole. The Magos tracked the soldier's biosign. It did not vanish immediately. The soldier was alive inside the stomach. The acid content was low. The heat was high. The Titan was not eating for nutrition. The stomach was a killing chamber, not a digestive one. Vetius accessed the noosphere, the digital web of data shared by the Mechanicus. He queried the fleet archives for Xenus matches, Tyranid bioforms consumed for biomass. Orcs fought for sport. These creatures did neither. They killed to remove human life. The Magos noted the efficiency of the design: low intelligence, high durability, solar dependency. He adjusted his sensors to the local defenders. He had seen small figures zipping between the buildings on wires. One of these locals swung past Vetius's position. The human was wearing brown leather and carrying a boxy mechanism on their hips. Vetius slowed his visual perception rate to analyze the device. It fired grappling hooks powered by compressed gas. The gas composition was unknown, but the pressure required to propel a human at such velocity was immense. The metal of the blades they carried was also unique. It was ultra-hard steel, folded in a way that resembled ancient Terran swordsmithing, but optimized for snapping off sections. The local soldier, a woman with short hair, swung toward a Titan that was cornering a group of civilians. She did not fire a weapon. She swung behind the creature. She latched onto the buildings, gaining altitude. She dropped. Her blade sliced a precise chunk of meat from the back of the Titan's neck. The creature instantly fell. It did not regenerate. It began to steam and dissolve. Magos Vetius felt a surge of binary data. That was the closest a tech priest came to excitement. The nape. The weakness was the nape. He immediately broadcasted this data on the encrypted command frequency. Priority Alpha. Target designated. Cervical spine, posterior. Depth 1 meter. Destroy to prevent regeneration. Captain Titus received the transmission. He did not question the source. He keyed his squad channel. Tactical Squad Solus. Listen closely. Target the back of the neck. Heavy weapons. Aim for the spine. Bolters. Concentrate fire on the vertebrae. The adjustment was instantaneous. The Astartes were soldiers of supreme adaptation. Brother Leandros, hearing the order, stopped trying to cripple his target. He waited. The Titan lunged. Leandros stepped inside the reach, grabbed the creature's hair, and vaulted over its shoulder. He jammed the muzzle of his bolter into the soft flesh at the base of the neck. He fired a 3-round burst. The mass-reactive shells detonated inside the spinal column. The Titan dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "It works," Leandros said, his voice flat. "Spread the word," Titus commanded. But knowing the weakness and exploiting it were different things. The Space Marines were few. The Titans were thousands. And the Imperial Guard could not aim with the precision of a Space Marine. For the unaugmented humans, hitting a moving target's neck while terrified was nearly impossible. The rout continued. On the rooftops, Commander Erwin Smith of the Survey Corps stared in bewilderment. He had seen the sky turn to fire. He had seen the metal eggs fall from the heavens. Now he saw giants clad in blue armor fighting the Titans with weapons that roared like thunder. He watched a blue giant punch a Titan in the face, shattering its teeth. This was outside all known parameters. Levi Ackerman landed beside him. His blades were dripping with evaporating blood. His expression was bored, but his eyes were sharp. "Who are they, Irvin?" Levi asked. "They aren't ours. They aren't Titans." "I don't know," Owen said. He watched the drop pod door blast open, killing a Titan that had been investigating it. But they are killing the Titans. That makes them useful. One of the blue giants, Titus, saw the two locals on the roof. He activated his jump pack. The turbine on his back screamed. Levi flinched, his hand going to his blade. Titus launched himself into the air, landing on the roof with a crash that cracked the tiles. He towered over the two Eldians. He was 8 feet of ceramite and gene-wrought muscle. He looked down at Irwin. "Identify," Titus boomed. His voice was amplified, shaking the dust from the chimney. Irwin Smith did not step back. He looked up at the golden eagle on Titus's chest. "I'm Commander Irwin Smith of the Survey Corps. You are fighting our enemy. I am Captain Titus of the Ultramarines. This planet is under Imperial compliance." Titus looked at Levi's gear. "Your weapons, they are effective. Better than yours, apparently," Levi said. "You waste too much movement." Titus ignored the insult. "We need to secure the evacuation. My forces are spread thin. The native defense force has collapsed." "They aren't a defense force," Levi said, looking down at the fleeing Imperial Guard. "They're just meat in funny hats." Irwin raised a hand. "We are retreating to the inner gate. War Maria is lost. If you want to live, you will follow us." Titus bristled. The Astartes did not retreat. They performed tactical withdrawals. But the logic was sound. The city was overrun. The landing zone was compromised. "We will hold the rear. Get your people to safety." As they spoke, the ground shook. It was a rhythmic impact, heavier than the other Titans. Titus turned. Marching through the broken gate was a new threat. It was covered in bone-white plates. It moved with purpose. It did not stumble. It sprinted. The armored Titan. Titus activated his tactical display. New contact. Heavily armored. Speed high. The armored Titan lowered its shoulder. It was aiming for the inner gate, the one that led to All Rose. If that gate fell, the next layer of defense would be breached before the evacuation was complete. "Stop that target," Titus roared. A Lehman Russ tank, commanded by a brave or foolish lieutenant, swiveled its turret. The battle cannon fired. The shell hit the armored Titan square in the chest. Smoke billowed. But when it cleared, the armor plates were merely cracked. The Titan did not stop. It plowed through the tank, sending the 60-ton vehicle spinning into a row of houses. Levi launched himself. He flew fast, faster than the Astartes' eye could easily track without enhancement. He spun, his blades biting into the joint behind the armored Titan's knee. The blade shattered. The armor was too thick. Levi cursed and grappled away. "It's hardened," Levi shouted. "Blades won't cut it." Titus assessed the situation. Standard bolters would not penetrate. He needed heavy ordnance. He checked the squad status. Brother Valius had the missile launcher. "Valius," Titus barked over the vox. "Target the knees. Kraken penetrating rounds." Valius knelt on a rooftop 300 meters away. He shouldered the missile launcher. The targeting spirit chimed. He fired. The missile streaked across the sky, leaving a smoke trail. It struck the back of the armored Titan's knee joint, right where Levi had tried to cut. The shaped charge detonated. It punched through the armor and blew the leg apart. The armored Titan crashed to the ground, skidding into a church. It roared, a sound that was horrifyingly human. It was not dead. It began to crawl. Steam rose from the leg as it tried to knit bone. "Finish it," Titus ordered. But before Valius could reload, a shadow fell over the district. The sun was blocked. Titus looked up. Standing over the outer wall, peering down with no skin on its face, was a monstrosity of steam and muscle. The Colossal Titan. It had not moved since kicking the outer gate. Now it raised its arm. It swept its hand across the top of the wall, knocking the Imperial artillery positions off the edge like breadcrumbs. Then the Colossal Titan leaned forward. It opened its mouth. It did not bite. It released a wave of superheated steam. The heat hit the district like a physical hammer. The remaining Imperial guardsmen in the plaza were boiled alive instantly. Their uniforms fused to their skin. The water in their bodies turned to vapor. Titus's armor temperature alarm screamed. The internal cooling systems cycled to maximum. He saw the paint on his pauldrons blister. Magos Vetius, hovering high up, was caught in the updraft. His servitors malfunctioned, their biological components cooking. Vetius routed power to his void shields. The energy barrier shimmered, holding back the heat, but his sensors were blinded. "This is not biological," Vetius transmitted, his voice showing a hint of strain. "This is thermal weapon discharge." The steam cloud provided cover. When it cleared, the armored Titan was gone. It had been retrieved, or had escaped in the confusion. The Colossal Titan remained, a statue of death overlooking the burning city. Titus realized the battle for the outer district was over. It was a total loss. The civilian casualties were in the tens of thousands. The Imperial Guard regiment was effectively destroyed. The Ultramarines had lost the element of surprise and were low on supplies. "Withdraw," Titus ordered. "Fall back to the second wall." The retreat was a nightmare. The streets were choked with the dead. The Titans were feasting. The Space Marines formed a rear guard, walking backward, firing single, disciplined shots into the eyes and knees of the pursuing horde. They acted as a breakwater, smashing the waves of monsters to buy time for the terrified humans to squeeze through the inner gate. Erwin Smith watched the Space Marines from the top of the inner wall. He saw them fighting. He saw them dying. He saw a Space Marine get grabbed by 3 Titans. The Marine detonated a crack grenade in his hand, taking the monsters with him. Erwin had seen many men die. He had never seen men die like that. They did not scream. They did not cry for their mothers. They died with a curse on their lips and a weapon in their hand. "These are not men," Erwin whispered. "They are monsters who fight for us." The inner gate slammed shut. The heavy locking bars fell into place. Shiganshina was abandoned. The Imperial Reclamation Force was trapped inside the walls of Paradis. Inside the safety of Wall Rose, the situation was nearing civil war. The refugees from the outer district were flooding the streets. Food was already scarce. Now, with an additional 10,000 mouths to feed, and an entire regiment of broken off-world soldiers demanding rations, the logistics were collapsing. Colonel Hayne, burnt and bandaged, argued with the garrison commander Pixis. "I act under the authority of the God Emperor of mankind," Hayne screamed. "You will provide supplies for my men immediately." Pixis, bald and calm, took a sip from his flask. "Your God Emperor is very far away, Colonel, and my granaries are very empty. Unless your tanks can eat stone, you will wait like everyone else." Titus ignored the politics. He was in a warehouse he had commandeered as a forward operating base. The tech marine of the squad, Brother Manus, was examining a set of ODM gear they had salvaged from a dead scout. "Report," Titus said. "It is ingenious, Captain," Manus said. "Primitive, yes. The metallurgy is poor compared to ceramite. But the propulsion system, it uses a gas I cannot identify. It is mined locally. They call it iceburst stone. It sublimates from solid to gas instantly, providing immense thrust. Can we use it?" The tech marine hesitated. "The machine spirit of this device is wild. It requires balance and dexterity that, well, a Space Marine is too heavy. We would snap the wires. However, the gas could be adapted. We could use it to recharge our flamer fuel, or perhaps modify jump pack thrusters. And the enemy? Manus pointed to a severed Titan finger they had recovered. It was shrinking. Even in the jar, it was evaporating. It defies the laws of conservation of mass. It requires sunlight. At night, they become dormant. Titus nodded. That was their advantage. The Imperium owned the night. We have lost contact with the fleet, Titus said. The interference from the steam and the atmospheric density is blocking long-range Vox. We are alone. We have 300 bolts per brother. We have no heavy air support. And we are surrounded by millions of these things. He looked at the map of the walls. We are not conquerors here anymore, Titus said. We are the besieged. Margus Vettius entered the warehouse. He floated in, his red robe singed. Captain, Vettius said, I have analyzed the wall structure. Is it sturdy? Titus asked. It is not stone, Vettius said. Titus looked up. Explain. Vettius projected a hologram from his eyes. It was a deep scan of the wall interior. The scan showed bone. It showed muscle. The walls are made of them, Vettius said. The walls are made of Titans, millions of them, hardened, standing shoulder to shoulder. The room went silent. The sanctuary was a cage made of the enemy. If sunlight touches the inside of those walls, Vettius continued, the apocalypse is not a possibility. It is a certainty. Titus looked at the map. He looked at the concentric circles of the walls. He realized the scale of the trap. We need to talk to the local leadership, Titus said. We need to find out who built this prison. And then we need to find out how to weaponize it. Outside, the sun set. The Titans in the captured district stopped moving. They stood still, their smiles frozen in the twilight. The silence that fell over the city was heavier than the roar of battle. It was the silence of a graveyard waiting to be filled. In the dungeons of the military police, a boy named Eren Yeager sat in a cell. He had seen the blue giants. He had seen them kill the Titans. He did not feel fear. He felt envy. He wanted that power. He wanted to kill them all. And in his blood, something ancient and terrible stirred, reacting to the presence of the warp-touched intruders. The coordinate was shifting. The timeline had broken. It concluded with the Imperium battered, the secrets of the walls revealed to the Mechanicus, and the uneasy alliance between the Space Marines and the Scouts beginning to form under the shadow of extinction. The technological gap was bridging, not with hope, but with the desperate need for survival. The collision was complete. The war of attrition had begun. The week following the fall of Wall Maria brought a silence that was more terrifying than the screaming. The refugees huddled in the Trost district were not merely hungry. They were spiritually broken. The presence of the off-worlders had shifted the dynamic of their despair. Before, they feared the Titans. Now they feared the Titans and the giant armored demigods who walked among them with faces of stone and weapons that smelled of sulfur. The Ultramarines had established a perimeter around the central plaza of Trost, commandeering the best stone structures for their logistics. They did not ask. They simply took. To a Space Marine, the mission comes first. The comfort of the civilian populace is a tertiary concern, relevant only insofar as it maintains order. Captain Titus stood on the balcony of the commandeered district headquarters. His armor was scarred, the blue ceramite scraped to raw grey plasteel in places where Titan teeth had failed to penetrate. He watched the food distribution lines below. It was a study in misery. The local military police were handing out hard bread. The Imperial Guardsmen of the Cadian 81st were pushing into the lines, demanding shares. Fights were breaking out. Titus saw a guardsman pistol whip a local man who refused to give up his sack of flour. Titus did not intervene. His duty was the preservation of the combat effectiveness of his force. Starving soldiers could not hold a line. If the locals had to go hungry so that the Emperor's servants could fight, that was the grim arithmetic of survival. Inside the headquarters, the friction between the two commands was becoming a physical heat. Pixis, the commander of the garrison, sat opposite Magos Vettius. Pixis looked like a man who had seen too much absurdity to be afraid. Vettius looked like a nightmare made of brass and red cloth. The tech priest was dissecting a canister of the local gas fuel on the table. His mechadendrites twitched with irritation. "You possess a fuel source of immense potency," Vettius rasped, his voice synthesized and devoid of empathy. "This iceburst stone, it sublimates at a pressure ratio that exceeds standard promethium expansion. Yet you use it to propel soldiers on wires. It is a waste. We require this fuel for the Thunderhawks. We require it to manufacture Flamamix." Pixis took a sip from his flask. "It is the only thing that lets us kill them, Magos. If we give you the gas, my men are grounded. We are sitting ducks. Your men are ineffective," Vettius countered. "I have calculated the kill ratios. For every Titan your survey corps kills, they suffer 30% casualties. The Space Marines kill without loss. The logic is absolute. The resources must go to the most efficient killers." Pixis narrowed his eyes. "And what happens when you decide to leave? You take our fuel, you fly away in your metal birds, and we are left here with nothing but the monsters." "We do not flee," Titus said, stepping into the room. His presence sucked the air out of the chamber. "We are stranded. The atmospheric disturbance prevents orbital extraction. We are digging in. But the Magos is right. We need ammunition. We need fuel. Our bolters are running dry. Once they are empty, we are just large men with knives." Commander Erwin Smith stood in the corner, silent until now. He was observing the Space Marine with the eyes of a gambler calculating odds. The Imperium offered power, but the cost was sovereignty. Erwin knew that if he refused, the giants would likely just take what they wanted. They had the strength. "We can share the mines," Erwin said. "But in exchange we want your technology. We want to know how your weapons work. We want the Thundersticks." Titus looked at Erwin. To share the holy technology of the Adeptus Mechanicus with primitives was heresy. But Titus was a practical man. He had learned on Graia that sometimes the Codex Astartes had to be adapted to the reality of the war. "We cannot give you bolters," Titus said. "The recoil would shatter your arms. But we can teach you discipline. We can improve your fortifications. And we can kill the things that frighten you." The alliance was struck, not with a handshake, but with a mutual recognition of desperation. But outside the room, unseen by the Astartes sensors, the true threat was watching. In the refugee crowds, 3 young soldiers from the 104th Cadet Corps huddled together. Rainer Braun stared at the Imperial Guardsman patrolling the street. He looked at the Thunderhawk gunship parked in the square, currently grounded for repairs. "They are too strong," Rainer whispered. He was shaking, not with fear, but with the pressure of the mission. "Marley has nothing like this. If these Iron Men, if they find the coordinate, if they take the Founder back to their stars, the world is finished. Marley is finished. Eldia is finished." Bertolt Hoover looked sick. "What do we do, Rainer? We can't fight them. Did you see that one? The one with the skull helmet?" He ripped a Titan's jaw off with his hands. "We have to cripple them," Annie Leonhardt said. Her voice was cold, bored, but her eyes were sharp. "They are stuck here. They are low on supplies. They are trying to adapt our gas. If we destroy their command, if we kill the big ones, the regular soldiers will panic. They are already breaking." "We hit them now?" Rainer asked. "No," and he said, "We wait for them to move. They are planning an expedition to the industrial city to secure the factories. We hit them in the open." The catastrophe began 3 days later. The Imperium had organized a convoy to move from Trost to an industrial complex near the edge of Wall Rose. They needed to retrofit the local factories to produce bolter casings. It was a massive operation. 4 chimeras, the armored personnel carriers of the Guard, rumbled down the cobblestone roads. A squad of Space Marines marched on foot, conserving the fuel of their jump packs. The Survey Corps rode with them on horses, looking like children next to the massive armored vehicles. Eren Yeager rode near the front next to Levi. Eren could not take his eyes off the Space Marines. He watched Brother Leandros scanning the horizon. The precision of their movement fascinated him. They did not waste energy. Every step was measured. "Do you think they are human?" Eren asked. Levi adjusted his grip on his reins. "They bleed. I saw one take a hit from a debris chunk. Red blood. That makes them human enough to die." The convoy entered a forest of giant trees. The shadows were deep. The birds were silent. Titus signaled a halt. His auto senses had picked up a vibration. It was rhythmic, heavy, fast. "Contact," Titus said over the vox. "Rear flank." It was not a swarm. It was a single signal. Bursting from the tree line came the female Titan. She did not run like a mindless beast. She sprinted with the form of an athlete. She moved low, using the trees for cover. The rear chimera didn't have time to traverse its turret. The female Titan leaped, her foot connecting with the vehicle's roof. The chimera was crushed instantly, flattened into a metal pancake. 12 guardsmen died before they knew they were under attack. "Ambush!" Colonel Haynes screamed over the radio. The female Titan did not stop to eat. She rolled, coming up with a fluidity that shocked the Astartes. She spun and kicked the second chimera, sending the 10-ton vehicle tumbling into the trees. She was targeting the heavy armor. She was dismantling the convoy's firepower. "Engage!" Titus roared. The Space Marines opened fire. Bolter rounds streaked through the air. They hit the female Titan's shoulder. Explosions bloomed on her skin. But she did not fall. She raised her arms to cover her nape. And where the bolts hit, the skin was not flesh. It was a hard, blue crystal. The bolts detonated on the surface, cracking the crystal but failing to penetrate the muscle beneath. "She has shielding," Leandros shouted. "Kinetic barriers." She was fast. She closed the distance to the Space Marine squad. Brother Valius raised his missile launcher. He had 1 crack missile left. He fired. The missile flew true, aiming for her chest. The female Titan saw it. In a move that defied all biological probability for a creature of that size, she slapped the missile out of the air. The warhead detonated against a tree, showering the road in shrapnel. She lunged at Valius. The Space Marine tried to dodge, but the female Titan grabbed him. Her hand wrapped around his torso. His power armor groaned. The ceramide plates began to crack. Valius drew his combat knife and stabbed her hand. She flinched, but she did not let go. She squeezed. There was a sickening crunch of metal and bone. Valius went limp. She threw his body aside like a broken doll. This was not a beast. This was a warrior. Titus charged. He activated his chainsword. The motor screamed. He did not aim for the legs. He aimed for the tendons in the arm. He met the female Titan as she turned. He was an ant fighting a wolf, but he was an ant made of the hardest material in the galaxy. He slashed. The chainsword bit into her ankle. Teeth flew off the blade as they hit the crystal hardening. The impact jarred Titus to his bones. The female Titan looked down at him. Her blue eyes were cold, calculating. She recognized him as the leader. She lifted her foot to stomp. Titus rolled, his jump pack flaring to push him clear. The ground where he had been standing shattered. Levi Ackerman and the scouts were engaging now. They swung through the trees, blades drawn, but the female Titan knew their moves. She swatted the wires out of the air. She hardened her nape whenever they got close. It was a stalemate. Eren watched from his horse. He saw the Space Marine die. He saw the chimeras burning. The rage that always lived in his heart began to boil. These things, these Titans, they took everything. They were taking his new allies. They were going to kill everyone. "I'm going to kill her," Eren whispered. He bit his hand. The lightning strike was yellow and gold. It blinded the Astartes' autosenses. A shockwave leveled the surrounding trees. From the steam, a new roar erupted. It was not the high-pitched shriek of the female Titan. It was a guttural, angry roar. The attack Titan burst from the smoke. Eren, in his Titan form, did not care about tactics. He slammed into the female Titan with the force of a freight train. The two giants tumbled through the forest, crushing trees and turning the soil into mud. Titus watched, his bolter raised but unfired. "Xenos capability confirmed," Leandros said, his voice trembling with righteous hate. "The boy is a Xenos host. He is a demon host. We must purge him." "Hold fire," Titus ordered. "Captain," Leandros shouted, "he just transformed into the enemy. He is a mutant. The Codex Astartes states clearly that the Codex Astartes does not account for this." Titus snapped. "Look at them. They are fighting." Eren was losing. The female Titan was a better fighter. She used leverage. She hooked Eren's leg and threw him. She hardened her fist and punched his jaw off. Eren screamed, a sound of pure rage, and scrambled back up. He was fighting like a brawler. She was fighting like a martial artist. But Eren had help. Titus saw the tactical opening. The female Titan was distracted by Eren. She was focused on the grapple. Her nape was exposed, the crystal hardening fading as she concentrated on her fists. "Squad," Titus commanded. "Target the female. Support the green giant." The Space Marines poured fire into the female Titan. They aimed for her eyes. They aimed for her joints. The bolter rounds blew apart her vision. Blinded, she stumbled. Eren took the chance. He tackled her, pinning her to the ground. He roared in her face and prepared to bite out her neck. But she was not done. She screamed. It was a sound that pierced the eardrums of the humans. It was a summons. From the depths of the forest, dozens of mindless Titans appeared. They ignored the humans. They ignored Eren. They ran straight for the female Titan. They began to eat her. "She is destroying the evidence," Erwin said, landing next to Titus. "She's letting them eat her body so she can escape in the confusion." Titus saw the steam rising. The female Titan's body was being consumed by the swarm. He scanned the steam with his thermal sensors. He saw a small heat signature ejecting from the nape. A human figure. It was using the ODM gear. It was fleeing into the canopy. "Sniper," Titus barked. "Thermal contact bearing 220. A Scout Marine Scout sniper took the shot. The needle rifle cracked. The figure in the trees jerked but did not fall. They vanished into the dense foliage. The swarm of Titans turned their attention to Eren. Eren was overwhelmed. He fought, punching heads off, but there were too many. His energy was fading. The Titan body collapsed, steam pouring from its wounds. The back of the attack, Titan's neck opened. Eren Yeager, human, half-conscious, pulled himself out. He hung there, exhausted, steam rising from his skin. He looked up to see the barrel of a bolt pistol. Captain Titus stood on the nape of the dissolving Titan. He aimed the weapon at Eren's head. Around them, the remaining Space Marines formed a kill circle, their weapons trained on the boy. Mikasa landed on the Titan's shoulder, her blades drawn, pointed at Titus. "Get away from him," she screamed. Levi landed behind Titus. "I wouldn't do that, Captain. You pull that trigger, and you won't leave this forest." Titus did not look at Levi. He looked at Eren. The boy was dangerous. He was an abomination. In any other circumstance, Titus would have executed him for the sin of existence. But Titus was also a strategist. He saw the power the boy held. He saw a weapon that could break the walls. "Stand down," Titus said to his men. Leandros lowered his bolter, but his resentment was palpable. "Captain, this is heresy. We are treating with a demon. We are surviving, Leandros. Secure the boy." The journey back to Trost was a funeral procession. The Imperium had lost heavy armor. They had lost a brother. And they had brought back a prisoner that half the Alliance wanted to kill and the other half wanted to worship. They threw Eren into a containment cell in the basement of the headquarters. But this was not a standard dungeon. The Adeptus Mechanicus had retrofitted it. Magos Vetius stood outside the heavy plasteel door. He was vibrating with data lust. "The biology is fascinating," Vetius told Titus. "The mass is generated from a subdimension. It is warpcraft undoubtedly, but it is anchored in genetics. The boy is the key. If we can replicate this, if we can create Servitor Titans, the crusade could be revitalized. We could reclaim the sector in months." Titus looked at the Magos. "You want to vivisect him. I want to understand him, Captain. To understand is to conquer." Commander Irwin arrived. He was accompanied by Levi and Hung. Hunger was looking at the Space Marines with a mix of terror and scientific adoration. "You have our soldier," Irwin said. "We want him back." "He is a security risk," Titus said. "He is an unsanctioned psyker equivalent. He turns into the enemy. He fights for humanity," Irwin said. "Does he?" Titus asked. "Or does he fight for his own instincts? When he was in that beast, he was feral. Can you control him? Can you control your machine men?" Levi asked, nodding at Vetius. The tension in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. The Space Marines had their hands on their bolters. The Scouts had their hands on their blades. It was a powder keg. Then the alarm sirens began to wail. It was the air raid siren, but there were no planes. Titus tapped his vox bead. "Report." "It is the wall," came the voice of a sergeant on the perimeter. "The wall rose gate. It has been breached." "Impossible," Titus said. "The Colossal Titan." "No, sir. It was sabotage. Explosives. Someone blew the hinges from the inside." Titus looked at Irwin. "The enemy is among us." The realization hit them both. The female Titan had help. The warriors were not just outside. They were inside the walls, wearing the faces of soldiers. "They are letting them in," Titus said. The strategic situation had shifted from a siege to a desperate defense of the inner sanctum. If Wall Rose fell, humanity would be pushed back to Walsena. The overcrowding would lead to starvation within weeks. The Imperium would be trapped in a box that was getting smaller by the hour. "We need the boy," Titus decided. He turned to the cell door. He punched the locking mechanism. The door slid open. Eren sat on the cot, his hands bound. He looked up at the giant armored man. "Get up," Titus said. "You're going to kill me?" Eren asked. Titus handed him a combat knife. It was the size of a sword for Eren. "No," Titus said. "I am going to point you at the enemy, and if you turn on us, I will kill you myself. Do you understand?" Eren took the knife. He looked at the blade. He saw his own reflection, and behind it the blue armor of the Space Marine. "I understand," Eren said. "I just want to kill them all." "Good," Titus said. "Then let us begin the slaughter." Outside, the sun was setting, but the Titans were pouring through the breached gate of Wall Rose, and this time they were not just mindless eaters. Leading them was the armored Titan, He roared a challenge to the city. The battle for Wall Rose had begun, and the Imperium, low on ammo, cut off from the stars and allied with monsters, had to hold the line. The strategic chain reaction was underway. The secrecy was gone. The powers of the world were revealed, and in the shadows, the true horror of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the corruption of chaos, began to seep into the hearts of the terrified, hopeless population. A Nurgle cult, born of despair and rot in the refugee camps, whispered its first prayers to the Grandfather. The Titans brought death, but the warp brought something much worse. It concluded with the breakdown of the status quo, the revelation of the Titan shifters, and the desperate unleashing of Eren Yeager as an Imperial asset. The catastrophe was no longer just physical, it was internal. The enemy was within the gates. The breach of Wall Rose was not merely a tactical failure, it was the geometric intersection of two different apocalypses. The armored Titan stood amidst the debris of the shattered gate. The dust of the pulverized stone hung in the air like a shroud. Rainer Braun, inside the nape of the monster, looked out at the city of Trost. He expected to see terror. He expected to see the primitive cannons of the garrison regiment and the terrified faces of the island devils. He did not expect to see a line of ceramide blue. Captain Titus had anticipated the breach. The logic of the enemy was sound. If they could not defeat the Astartes in the open field, they would force the Imperium to defend a population center, effectively neutralizing their mobility. The armored Titan roared a challenge that shook the roof tiles of the district. It was a sound of psychological warfare designed to freeze prey. The Space Marines did not freeze. They adjusted their aim. "Hold the line," Titus commanded. His voice was calm, amplified by the Vox grill of his helmet to boom across the plaza. "Do not engage until the target crosses the kill zone threshold." The armored Titan charged. It lowered its shoulder plating, the hardened bone shimmering in the sunlight. It moved with the momentum of a runaway locomotive. Behind it, a swarm of smaller, mindless Titans poured through the hole in the wall. They tumbled over the rubble, driven by the scent of 10,000 humans trapped in the evacuation bottlenecks. "Now," Titus said. The trap was sprung. It was not a trap of explosives, for the Imperium had none to spare. It was a trap of physics. Magos Vettius had calculated the friction coefficient of the Titan armor. He had determined that while the plates were impervious to small arms fire, the joints were susceptible to thermal shock. The surviving Chimera transports, modified with the last of the Promethium reserves and enriched with the local ice-burst gas, rolled out from the side streets. They did not fire bolters. They fired streams of supercooled gas. The flamethrowers had been reversed. The ice-burst gas hit the armored Titan's legs. The sudden drop in temperature caused the air to scream. Frost coated the bone armor instantly. The laws of thermodynamics took hold. The armor contracted rapidly. Micro-fractures appeared on the surface of the plating. Rainer roared in confusion as his legs stiffened, the joints freezing solid in mid-stride. He stumbled, crashing face first into the cobblestones. The impact shattered the frozen armor on his knees. "Deployment," Titus ordered. "Unleash the asset." From the roof of the headquarters, the attack Titan launched itself. Eren Yeager had been waiting. The rage in his mind was a blinding white noise, but the Space Marines had given him a singular directive: kill the armored one. Eren landed on Reiner's back. The impact cratered the street. This was not the clumsy brawling of their previous encounters. Titus had briefed Eren. He had instructed the boy on the principles of leverage and joint manipulation. Eren did not strike the armor. He grabbed the exposed, shattered knee joint. He pulled. The sound of tearing muscle and snapping bone echoed through the district. Reiner screamed a human sound emanating from the monster's throat. The armored Titan thrashed, trying to throw Eren off, but the attack Titan held fast, pinning the enemy down with a wrestler's grip. While the Titans grappled, the Ultramarines went to work on the swarm. It was a harvest. The Astartes conserved their bolts. They used chainswords and combat knives. They fought in pairs. One Marine would taunt a Titan, drawing its attention. The other would hamstring it and deliver the killing blow to the nape. It was brutal, efficient butchery, but there were too many of them. For every Titan that fell, 2 more squeezed through the breach. On the eastern flank of the district, the situation was deteriorating. The Imperial Guard remnants under Colonel Hayne were holding a barricade of overturned wagons. They were armed with laser guns, which were effective against human targets, but lacked the stopping power to put down a Titan quickly. They had to focus fire burning through the eyes of the monsters to blind them. "Keep firing!" Hayne screamed, his last pistol cracking. "Aim for the eyes. Don't let them get close." But the enemy was not just in front of them. In the refugee camps, deep within the safety of the district, a new horror was blooming. The overcrowding, the lack of sanitation, and the despair of the population had created a psychic resonance. The warp is a mirror. It reflects the emotions of sentient beings, and the emotions in Trost were fear, hopelessness, and decay. A refugee, a woman who had lost her children in the first attack, began to cough. It was a wet, rattling cough. She sat in the mud surrounded by hundreds of others. Her skin was grey. Boils were erupting on her neck. She did not feel pain. She felt a strange, lethargic peace. She looked at her hands. The flesh was sloughing off, revealing bone that was not white, but a sickly green. "Grandfather loves you," a voice whispered in her mind. It was not her voice. It was deep, ancient, and rot-wet. The woman stood up. She vomited a stream of black bile onto the refugees sleeping next to her. The bile was alive. It writhed with maggots. The people who were touched by it screamed as their skin began to bubble. They did not die. They changed. Their eyes clouded over, turning a milky yellow. Their jaws slackened. They stood up clumsily, their limbs jerking with unnatural spasms. The plague of Nurgle had found a foothold on Paradis. Commander Erwin Smith was coordinating the evacuation from the top of the inner wall when the report came in. It was not a report of Titans. It was a report of madness. "Commander," a scout shouted, landing on the wall, his face pale. "The refugees, they are eating each other, but they aren't Titans. They are rotting while they walk." Erwin looked down at the rear of the district. Smoke was rising, but it was not the clean smoke of battle. It was a greenish haze. He saw the crowd shifting. He saw shambling figures tearing into the living. It looked like a riot, but the movement was wrong. It was a tide of slow inevitability. "Levi, go," Erwin ordered. "Find out what is happening. If it is a Titan ability, we need to know." Levi Ackerman dropped from the wall. He swung through the district, moving toward the refugee sector. The smell hit him first. It was the smell of a latrine pit left in the sun for a month, mixed with the sweetness of gangrene. He landed on a roof and looked down. The horror was absolute. These were not the smiling giants. These were his own people. Men, women, and children dragging their rotting bodies forward. A soldier of the garrison regiment tried to stop them. He impaled a walker with his bayonet. The walker did not stop. It slid up the bayonet, ignoring the steel through its gut, and bit the soldier's throat out. The soldier fell screaming. As Levi watched, the soldier's scream turned into a gurgle. The soldier stood up. His wound was not healing. It was festering instantly. He joined the horde. "This isn't Titans," Levi whispered. "This is a disease." He saw a squad of Imperial Guardsmen trying to hold a street. The Guardsmen were terrified. They fired their laser guns. The beams burned holes in the walkers, But unless they hit the brain, the walkers kept coming. "Burn them," a sergeant screamed. Levi saw a guardsman get dragged down. The walkers did not eat him quickly. They tore him apart slowly, sharing the meat. It was a communion of filth. Back at the gate, the battle between the Titans had reached a stalemate. Reiner had managed to kick Eren off. The armored Titan was limping, his leg ruined by the thermal shock and Eren's savagery. But Reiner had a mission. He ignored Eren. He turned toward the inner gate. He was going to break the second wall. If he breached the wall rose completely, the humanity of Paradis would be pushed into the final pocket of War Signer. It would be the end. Titus saw the maneuver. The captain was fighting 3 Titans simultaneously, his chainsword a blur of motion. He decapitated one, severed the arm of another, and kicked the third into a building. He checked his tactical display. The armored Titan was gaining speed. "Leandros," Titus shouted. "The melter charge." Brother Leandros was positioned on the archway of the inner gate. He held a satchel charge. It was an Imperial melter bomb, a weapon designed to melt through the hull of a starship. It was the last one they had. "I am in position, Captain," Leandros replied. "Wait for him," Titus ordered. "Drop it behind the neck plates." Reiner charged. He lowered his head to ram the gate. He did not see the Space Marine above him. He hit the gate with a thunderous crash. The wood splintered. The stone groaned. But the gate held for a moment. In that moment, Leandros dropped the charge. The melter bomb landed squarely between the shoulder blades of the armored Titan. Leandros detonated it. The explosion was not loud. It was a hiss of pure thermal energy. A sphere of superheated plasma expanded, vaporizing the armor plates, the flesh, and the spine. Reiner screamed as the heat cooked him inside his cockpit. The armored Titan collapsed forward, its upper back gone, replaced by a glowing crater of molten slag. Reiner was exposed. He was half conscious, his regeneration factor fighting a losing battle against the cauterized wounds. "Capture him," Titus ordered. "Do not kill the host. We need intelligence." But before the Space Marines could move, a shadow fell over the plaza. The wind picked up, blowing the dust away. Standing on top of the wall, looking down with sorrowful eyes, was the Colossal Titan. Bertolt had transformed. He did not climb down. He simply fell. The Colossal Titan toppled forward from the top of Wall Rose. It was a strategic body slam. A 60-meter mass of muscle and bone falling on the district. "Take cover," Titus roared. The impact was like a meteor strike. The shockwave flattened half of Trost district. Buildings were wiped from the map. The overpressure wave liquefied the organs of anyone caught in the open. The Ultramarines braced themselves, engaging the magnetic locks in their boots, their armor servos whining against the force. Eren, in his Titan form, was blown backward, tumbling like a ragdoll. When the dust cleared, the devastation was total. The armored Titan was gone, snatched up by Berthold in the confusion. The Colossal Titan was evaporating, emitting a massive cloud of steam that burned the skin of anyone nearby. The breach in the outer gate was still open, and Titans were still pouring in. But the true crisis was behind the line. The shockwave had knocked down the barricades containing the Nurgle outbreak. The rotters were loose. Titus pulled himself from a pile of rubble. His armor warning runes were flashing amber. He checked his squad status. All Marines functional. Injured but functional. The Imperial Guard had suffered 60% casualties. "Captain," it was Magos Vetius over the Vox. His signal was garbled by the interference. "The biological hazard in Sector 4. It is spreading. It is a pathogen of warp origin." "Explain," Titus said, reloading his bolter. "It reanimates the necrotic tissue. It is aggressive. It is." The Magos paused. "It is logically consistent with the contagions of the plague god. We must sterilize the area." Titus looked at the map. Sector 4 was the refugee center. Thousands of civilians. Sterilize? Titus asked. Incinerate, Vettius said. We cannot allow the infection to reach the inner wall. If it enters the crowded population of Wall Sina, the war is lost in 3 days. We must burn the district. Titus looked at the stream of Titans coming through the gate. Then he looked at the green smoke rising from the refugee camp. He had to choose. Fight the enemy in front or the sickness behind. He made the choice of a commander. Squad Solus, hold the gate, Titus ordered. Hold it with your lives. Use the Titan boy as a shield. I will deal with the infection. Titus moved toward the rear. He met Commander Erwin and Levi in the street. The scouts were staring at the horde of rotters advancing toward them. What are they? Erwin asked. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his horror. They don't die when we cut their necks. They are the lost, Titus said grimly. They are vessels of corruption. How do we save them? Levi asked, gripping his blades. We don't, Titus said. He looked at the Cadian chimera that had pulled back from the gate. He signaled the tank commander. Bring the flamer to the front. You can't mean... Erwin started realizing what the Space Marine intended. There is no cure, Titus said. This is not a disease of the body. It is a disease of the soul. If we let them touch the inner gate, everyone inside dies. That is murder. Hunger, Zoe shouted, stepping forward. We have to study it. We have to find her. There is no time, Titus shouted. He pointed at the horde. It was running now. The rotters were gaining speed, fueled by unnatural vigor. Titus climbed onto the hull of the chimera. He took the heavy bolter mount. Burn it, he ordered the driver. The chimera unleashed the ice-burst flame. But this time, it was not a freezing mist. It was ignited. The mixture of promethium and the highly volatile gas created a firestorm of white-hot intensity. The stream of fire hit the front rank of the rotters. They did not scream. They crackled. The fire consumed them, turning the infection into ash. Levi watched. He saw the faces of the people he had sworn to protect melting in the fire. He saw the Space Marine standing amidst the flames like a demon of judgment. This is your way, Levi asked quietly. This is how the Imperium saves us. We do not save the individual, Levi, Titus said, not looking back. We save the species. The fire raged for an hour. Sector 4 was reduced to a blackened scar. The smell of burnt meat hung heavy over Trost. The Nurgle outbreak was contained, but the cost was the soul of the Alliance. The scouts looked at the Space Marines not with awe, but with fear. At the gate, the battle was turning. Eren recovered from the shockwave. He was berserk. He did not have a target anymore, so he attacked the mindless Titans. He was a whirlwind of violence, ripping heads off, crushing spines. He grabbed a massive boulder, a piece of the shattered wall. He's trying to seal it, Armin Arlet shouted from a rooftop. He knows what to do. Cover him, Brother Leandros ordered. The Space Marines and the surviving scouts formed a protective corridor. They cut down the Titans, trying to stop Eren. Eren carried the boulder screaming into the void of his own mind. He slammed the rock into the breach. The impact shook the ground. The flow of Titans was cut off. The battle was won, but Trost was a graveyard. In the aftermath, the silence was heavy. Titus stood in the center of the plaza. His armor was covered in soot and Titan blood. Erwin Smith rode up to him. The commander of the Survey Corps looked at the blackened ruins of the refugee sector. You burned 3,000 people, Erwin said. I saved 50,000, Titus replied. He removed his helmet. His face was scarred and weary. You are fighting a war for survival, Commander. In this war, there is no room for mercy. Only duty. Erwin looked at the pile of ash. He realized that the Imperium was not a savior. It was a different kind of monster. A monster that was on their side for now. "We have the gate," Erwin said, "but the Colossal and the Armored escaped, and we have this." He gestured to the rot. "The Magos has analyzed the residue," Titus said. "He calls it Nurgle's rot. It feeds on despair." "Then we are doomed," Erwin said, "because that is all we have left." "Not all," Titus said. He pointed to the sky. The clouds were breaking. The sun was shining on the grim scene. "We have hate. Hate is a powerful weapon. If you want to survive, you must learn to hate the enemy more than you fear them." In the dungeons beneath the city, Eren Yeager sat in the dark. He was shivering. He could feel the memories of the Titan, but he could also feel something else. When the rotters had been near him, he had felt a connection, a whispers. The coordinate was not just connected to the Titans, it was a beacon, and the beacon had been seen by something in the warp. Deep in the Imperium, an eye opened. It was a bloated, weeping eye. The grandfather had noticed the little island. He had noticed the suffering, and he was pleased. The strategic chain reaction was complete. The wall was sealed, but the infection was sown. The Imperium had established dominance but lost the trust of the locals. The warriors of Marley were beaten, but not broken, and they now knew that the enemy was willing to burn their own to win. The escalation was irreversible. The war had shifted from a battle for territory to a battle for the soul of the planet. And in the shadows of the burnt district, a single spore survived deep in the lung of a rat. It waited. It evolved. The first victory against chaos is always a lie. The rot does not end. It festers. It concluded with the tactical victory of Sealing Wall Rose, overshadowed by the moral atrocity of the Purge and the introduction of the Nurgle threat. The alliance is fractured by doctrine. The enemy is no longer just biological giants, but a metaphysical cancer. The stakes have shifted from extinction to damnation. The weeks following the incineration of Sector 4 were defined by a suffocating grimness that permeated every layer of life within Wall Rose. The alliance between the Imperium and the Eldians was fraying under the weight of logistical reality. The food reserves were gone. The influx of refugees from Walmaria, combined with the loss of the agricultural districts in the outer zones, had created a caloric deficit that no amount of rationing could solve. The populace was starving, and starving men do not fear monsters. They fear their masters. The royal government in Mitras, shielded by the inner wall Sena, made its move. They did not send aid. They sent a demand. The presence of the off-world heretics was declared a violation of the sanctity of the walls. The order was absolute. Surrender the Titan shifter Eren Yeager and the xenotech weaponry of the Astartes, or face total blockade. It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. They held the remaining grain stockpiles. Captain Titus stood in the war room of the Trost headquarters. The map on the table was covered in red markers indicating civil unrest. Opposite him stood Commander Erwin Smith. Erwin looked gaunt. The burden of leadership had stripped the flesh from his bones, leaving only the sharp angles of his resolve. "They are starving us out," Erwin said. "The interior police have seized the supply routes. They want us to turn on each other. If we do not act, the people will riot, and the Titans will walk over the ashes. They threaten the Emperor's servants with hunger," Titus said, his voice a low growl. "It is a tactical error. A space marine can function for weeks on localized nutrient paste. Your people cannot. We have to overthrow them," Erwin said. It was treason. It was the death sentence. But he said it with the calm of a man ordering tea. "We must seize the capital. We must take the throne." Titus considered the proposition. The Codex Astartes discouraged interference in planetary governance, unless the governance was heretical or impeded the war effort. The royal government was doing both. They were hoarding resources needed for the crusade. They were obstructing the defense of the realm. Therefore, they were enemies of the Imperium. "We will not just overthrow them," Titus said. "We will decapitate them. But we need the boy. Where is Yeager?" "He was taken," Hungazoe admitted, stepping from the shadows. Her glasses were cracked. "We were ambushed. The interior police. They have new gear, anti-personnel equipment. They killed 3 of my squad. They took Eren and Historia Rice." Titus did not show anger. He showed focus. The enemy had captured a strategic asset. The asset must be recovered. "Track them," Titus ordered. Margos Vetius projected a holographic map. "I placed a radiation tag on the boy's skeletal structure during his containment. The isotope is faint, but tracking is positive. They have moved him to a location beneath the family estate of the Rice bloodline. A chapel, underground. Prepare the Thunderhawk," Titus said. "The Thunderhawk is grounded, Captain," Vetius replied. "Fuel reserves are at critical. We have enough for 1 short-range hop or flamer ammunition. We cannot do both." "Then we walk," Titus said, "and we kill everything in our way." The assault on the Rice Chapel was not a covert operation. It was a mechanized breach. The scouts rode on horses, their green cloaks fluttering. The Space Marines ran alongside them, their power armor servos whining with the rhythm of a forced march. They moved with a speed that terrified the locals. A human runs to survive. A Space Marine runs to kill. They reached the chapel at dusk. It was a modest stone structure in the middle of nowhere. But the Auspex scans revealed a massive cavern beneath it. A cavern filled with heat signatures. Kenny Ackerman waited inside the crystal cave. He leaned against a pillar of glowing blue stone. He checked the load in his pistols. He knew the scouts were coming. He looked forward to gutting Levi. But he had heard the rumors of the blue giants. He didn't believe them. Men were men. Some were just bigger targets. Rod Rice stood on the central dais. Eren was chained to the floor, gagged. Historia stood before them, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. Rod held a syringe. It glowed with a purple fluid. "This is the only way, Historia," Rod whispered. "You must eat him. You must take the founding power. You must cleanse the world of these invaders." The doors to the chapel above exploded. Not opened. Exploded. A cracked grenade shattered the heavy oak. Debris rained down into the cavern. Kenny reacted instantly. Squad. Ambush positions. The interior police, equipped with their anti-personnel vertical maneuvering gear, zipped into the air. They swung from the crystal pillars, their movements erratic and fast. They were designed to kill humans. They were designed to shoot targets from blind spots. Levi Ackerman dropped into the cavern first. He moved like a spinning razor. He deflected a bullet with his blade and slashed the throat of a gunman. Kenny laughed. "There you are, runt." Kenny fired his shotgun pistols. The spread was wide. Levi dodged, but the pellets sparked against the crystal. Then the floor shook. A heavy boot stepped into the light. Captain Titus entered the cavern. He did not swing on a wire. He dropped 40 feet from the chapel hole, landing in a crouch that cracked the hardened crystal floor. He stood up. Kenny stared. It was not a man. It was a tank on 2 legs. "What the hell is that?" Kenny muttered. Titus raised his bolter. He did not aim. The machine spirit of the weapon calculated the trajectory. He fired. The bolt struck an interior police soldier in midair. The man did not fall. He detonated. The mass-reactive shell blew his torso into a red mist. The panic among Kenny's squad was immediate. They were elite killers, but they were killing men. They were not ready for the angels of death. "Scatter!" Kenny screamed. "Use the pillars!" A soldier tried to hook onto Titus's pauldron. The grapple hit the ceramite and pinged off. Titus reached out, grabbed the wire and yanked. The soldier was pulled from the air, screaming, and slammed into the ground at Titus's feet. Titus crushed the man's chest with a single stomp. "This is not war," Titus broadcasted over the Vox. "This is pest control." Kenny Ackerman was a survivor. He saw the tactical disparity. He saw that his guns were useless. He activated his gas, propelling himself toward the dais. He wasn't going to fight the giant. He was going to secure the Titan power. Levi intercepted him. The two Ackermans clashed in a blur of steel and sparks. "Give it up, Kenny," Levi shouted. "You can't win against them." "I don't need to win, Levi. I just need the shot." On the dais, Rod Rice was panicking. The invaders were here. The plan was failing. He shoved the syringe toward Historia. "Do it now, or humanity falls." Historia looked at the syringe. She looked at Eren, who was crying, begging her to eat him to save everyone. She looked at the blue giant slaughtering the police with cold mechanical precision. She realized that eating Eren wouldn't stop the giant. Nothing would stop the giant. The power of the Titans was obsolete. She slapped the syringe out of her father's hand. "I won't do it," she screamed. "I'm sick of crying. I'm sick of being a god." The syringe spun through the air. It shattered on the hot crystal floor. The purple fluid hissed. Rod Rice stared at the broken glass. His mind snapped. The desperation, the cowardice, and the proximity to the unshielded warp presence of the Astartes triggered a reaction. "Father, forgive me," Rod whimpered. He dropped to his knees. He began to lap up the fluid from the floor. He licked the glass. Magos Vetius entered the cavern. He was not fighting. He was scanning. He floated on his suspensor platform, ignoring the bullets whizzing past him. His optical mechadendrites were focused on the walls. "Captain," Vetius transmitted, "these walls, they are not merely hardened Titan skin. They are resonant. They are batteries." "Ignore it, Magos," Titus replied, punching a gunman out of the air. "Secure the objective." "No, Captain. You do not understand. The energy signature is identical to the black stone pylons of the Cadian Gate. This cavern is a dampening field. It suppresses the psychic footprint of this planet. That is why the Crusade missed it. That is why the Tyranids have not descended." Vetius moved toward a large, glowing pillar near the dais. His logic was sound, but his greed was fatal. He saw a power source that could recharge the fleet's distress beacon. He saw a way to call for help. "If I drain this," Vetius said, "I can signal McCragger." "Do not touch it," Titus ordered. "We do not know what it holds back." Vetius, driven by the dogma of the quest for knowledge, extended a high-voltage siphon. He drove the connector into the crystal. The reaction was instantaneous. The light in the cavern died. The blue glow turned to a sickly, pulsating violet. The dampening field collapsed. On the floor, Rod Rice screamed. But it was not a Titan transformation. The fluid he had ingested was Titan spinal fluid, yes, but without the dampening field, the raw energy of the war flooded into the vacuum. The Nurgle spore that had been dormant in the atmosphere, released during the burning of Sector 4, seized the opportunity. Rod Rice did not become a Titan. He became a vessel. His body expanded. It did not stop at 15 meters. It did not stop at 60. Flesh erupted from his back like boiling dough. Ribs burst outward, forming a cage of bone that dripped with slime. His face elongated, the skin tearing to reveal a skull that was constantly rotting and regrowing. The heat in the cavern spiked. It wasn't the steam of a Titan. It was the heat of fever. "Retreat," Titus roared. "Everyone out." The cavern began to collapse. The ceiling cracked. Rod Rice continued to grow, smashing the pillars, crushing the remaining interior police. Kenny Ackerman looked up at the monstrosity, his face pale. "Well, ain't that a mess?" Kenny whispered. A piece of falling debris crushed him instantly. Levi grabbed Historia. Mikasa grabbed Eren, shattering his chains with a swing of her blade. The scouts and the Space Marines scrambled for the exit. They burst out of the chapel just as the ground erupted. The rice monster rose. It was 120 meters long. It could not stand. It dragged itself on its belly, a slug of muscle and bone. But it was not just meat. Clouds of flies buzzed around it. Where it touched the grass died and turned to black slime. "It is a Nurgle engine," Vettius stated, his voice devoid of emotion but filled with calculation. "I have made a miscalculation." "You broke the shield," Titus said, grabbing the Magos by his robes. "You damned us." "I signaled the fleet," Vettius argued. "The beacon is lit." "You lit a beacon for every predator in the sector." The rice monster began to crawl toward the highest concentration of life. It was crawling toward Orvid District. It was crawling toward the inner wall. And it was emitting a psychic scream that echoed not in the air, but in the minds of everyone present. Eren fell to his knees, clutching his head. "It's so loud," he screamed. "The voice, it's laughing." The strategic situation had shifted from a civil war to an existential crisis in the span of 10 minutes. The coup was technically successful. The government had fallen because the government was dead or fleeing. But there was no time to consolidate. "We have to kill it," Owen said, watching the mountain of rot drag itself across the plains. "How?" Levi asked. "It's twice the size of the Colossal, and it smells like death." "We use the wall," Titus said. He looked at the map. Orvid District is a choke point. We lure it there. We use the remaining explosives. We use the Titan boy. "We have no explosives left," Hang said. "You used them on the gate." "We have the Thunderhawk," Vettius said. Titus looked at the Magos. "Explain." "The Thunderhawk has no fuel for combat," Vettius said, "but its reactor is intact. If we override the machine spirit, if we turn the safety protocols off, it is a tactical nuclear device." "You want to crash our only way off this rock?" Titus asked. "It is the only weapon with sufficient yield to incinerate that biomass," Vettius said. "Logic dictates sacrifice." Titus looked at the rice monster. He looked at the scouts. He looked at the terrified Historia. "Do it," Titus said. The preparation for the Battle of Orvid was a frenzy of activity. The scouts evacuated the civilians to the far side of Wall Sinner. The garrison regiment loaded their cannons, knowing they were useless but needing to do something. Eren stood on the wall, looking at the approaching horror. He felt small. Even as a Titan, he was an insect compared to that thing. "Captain," Eren said. Titus stood beside him. "Why do you fight? You are stranded. You are dying. Why do you care if we get eaten?" "Because I am a space marine," Titus said. His bolter was empty. He held his chainsword. "We are the defenders of humanity, all humanity, even the lost branches." "But we are monsters," Eren said. "I am a monster." Titus looked at the boy. "We are all monsters, Eren. The question is who you bite." The rice monster reached the wall at dawn. It did not try to climb. It simply leaned against the wall. The heat of its body caused the stone to crack. It raised its head, a skull the size of a house, opening a mouth that dripped with liquid corruption. "Now!" Erwin shouted. The garrison fired a volley of grape shot. It did nothing but annoy the beast. Eren transformed. The attack titan roared and picked up a bundle of gunpowder barrels, the last of the local reserves. He sprinted along the wall and threw them into the monster's mouth. The explosion blew the face open, but the flesh began to knit immediately, writhing with maggots. "It's regenerating too fast," Hang screamed. High above, the Thunderhawk gunship descended. It was not flying gracefully. It was falling with style. Brother Valius, the pilot, had locked the controls. He had ejected moments before, using his jump pack to land on the wall. The gunship screamed toward the open mouth of the rice monster. The reactor was cycling to overload. For the Emperor, Valius shouted from the wall. The Thunderhawk impacted the exposed core of the monster. The explosion was blinding. A miniature sun bloomed against the wall of Orvard. The shockwave knocked everyone off their feet. The heat vaporized the rice monster's upper half instantly. The Nurgle flesh could not regenerate from atomic fire. Chunks of burning meat rained down on the district, but they were sterile. The fire had cleansed them. The smoke cleared. The monster was gone. Only a smoking crater remained. The soldiers cheered. It was a victory. The coup was done. The monster was dead. But Titus did not cheer. He was looking at the sky. The dampening field was down. Vettius had broken the shroud. The sky was no longer blue. It was tinged with a sickly purple bruise in the upper atmosphere. The warp was bleeding in. And far above, in the cold void of space, a tendril of something ancient shifted. It was not the Imperial fleet. Vettius approached Titus. He held a slate. "Captain," Vettius said quietly, "I've analyzed the signal data from the pylon before it collapsed." "Did the fleet receive it?" Titus asked. "Yes," Vettius said, "but the signal was not encrypted correctly. It was an open broadcast." Meaning everyone heard it. Titus looked at the horizon. On the other side of the ocean, in the land of Marley, the warrior unit was in chaos. Zeke Yeager, the beast Titan, held a radio receiver. He heard the scream. It wasn't a radio message. It was a psychic roar. But Zeke wasn't the only one listening. In the dark space between the stars, a hive mind stirred. It felt the sudden flare of psychic energy. It tasted the biomass. It tasted the Titan flesh. It tasted the Nurgle rot. It was a buffet. And on the surface of the moon of Paradis, a green metal light flickered on. The Necron tomb complex, disturbed by the destruction of the pylon, began its wake-up cycle. The massive outcome of the small choice was clear. The war for Paradis was no longer a local insurrection. It was now a galactic theatre. In the capital, Historia Rice was crowned queen. She sat on the throne, flanked by Captain Titus and Commander Erwin. It was a grim coronation. She was a puppet queen for a military junta run by off-world giants. "We have won the war," Titus told the assembly of nobles and officers. "But we have lost the element of surprise. The galaxy knows we are here." "What comes next?" Historia asked, her voice small in the great hall. Titus looked at the mural on the ceiling, depicting the history of the Titans. "War," Titus said. "Total war." The act closed with the image of a single spore pod entering the atmosphere. It was not Imperial. It was not Titan. It was biological. It was Tyranid. It landed in the forest of giant trees. A lictor emerged, its chameleon skin blending with the bark. It had one mission: locate the biomass, locate the coordinate. The collision was absolute. The walls were no longer a prison. They were a dinner plate. It concluded with the consolidation of power, the destruction of the Nurgle Titan, and the catastrophic removal of the planet's stealth field. The players were all on the board. The final convergence was approaching. The forest of giant trees was silent. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum. There were no birds. There were no insects. There was only the wet sound of chewing. A scout patrol led by Sasha Browse moved through the undergrowth. They were looking for game to feed the starving capital. They found only husks. A deer lay on the moss. It was not decomposing. It was dehydrated. Its internal organs had been liquefied and sucked out. Sasha touched the carcass. It crumbled into grey dust. Above them the canopy darkened. It was noon, but the sun was blocked. Sasha looked up. The sky was filled with spores. They drifted down like snow. One landed on her hand. It burned. She wiped it off, leaving a red welt. Then she heard the chittering. It came from everywhere. The trees themselves seemed to be vibrating. "Run," Sasha whispered. They ran back to the horses, but the horses were gone. In their place stood creatures that defied sanity. They were the size of dogs, but armored in chitin. They had 4 arms. The upper pair ended in scything talons. They were eating the horses with a frenzied mechanical efficiency. A gaunt raised its head. It had no eyes, only a sensory patch. It hissed, exposing rows of needle teeth. Sasha drew her bow. She fired. The arrow hit the gaunt in the shoulder. It did not flinch. It shrieked a sound that summoned the swarm. Hundreds of them dropped from the trees. The scouts died in seconds. There was no heroism. There was only biomass assimilation. In the command center at Mitras, Captain Titus watched the strategic map turn red. The red was not enemy troop movements. It was the biosphere dying. Magos Vetius projected the data. The spore count is rising exponentially. The local flora is being digested. We have 12 hours before the atmosphere becomes toxic to unaugmented human life. It is a splinter fleet, Titus said. A tendril of the Great Devourer, drawn by the psychic beacon you lit. It is logical, Vetius said. High biomass concentration. Titan biological density is extremely efficient. They have come to feed. Commander Irwin looked at the map. He did not know what a Tyranid was, but he understood the look on the Space Marine's face. He had never seen Titus look afraid. He did not look afraid now. He looked resigned. "What do we do?" Irwin asked. "We fight," Titus said, "but we cannot win on the ground. The Tyranids do not fight. They consume. Every soldier we lose adds to their strength. Every Titan they eat gives them more mass." As he spoke, the air raid sirens wailed. But it was not the Tyranids. The Marleyan airship fleet emerged from the clouds over the southern coast. 20 Zeppelin-class dreadnoughts. They were escorted by hundreds of biplanes. On the lead ship, Margath stood on the bridge. Beside him stood Zeke Yeager. "The devils have lost their walls," Margath said. "We bombed the capital. We dropped the paratroopers. We take the coordinate." Zeke adjusted his glasses. He looked down at the green land. Something was wrong. The forest looked grey. "Commence the operation," Margath ordered. The airships opened their bay doors. Capsules dropped. Inside them were Eldian prisoners injected with spinal fluid. Zeke screamed into the radio, triggering the transformation. Hundreds of pure Titans formed in mid-air. They rained down on the fields south of Orsina. It was a terrifying weapon. It had conquered nations. But the ground they landed on was already occupied. The Titans crashed into the swarm. Zeke watched through binoculars. He expected the Titans to rampage. Instead, he saw them being covered. The Tyranid swarm flowed over the Titans like ants over a beetle. The Titans swatted and crushed, killing dozens of gaunts. But the Tyranids were infinite. They crawled into the Titans' mouths. They burrowed into their eyes. Then the larger bioforms appeared. Carnifexes, living battering rams. A Carnifex slammed into a 15-meter Titan. The impact shattered the Titan's legs. The Carnifex used its scything talons to decapitate the giant. It did not regenerate. The Tyranids ate the nape before the steam could rise. "By the source," Zeke whispered. "What are those things?" The Marleyan invasion had landed in a meat grinder. The Tyranids ignored the politics. They saw the Titans as high-calorie delivery systems. They saw the airships as floating prey. Gargoyles, winged Tyranids, launched from the forest canopy. They were a cloud of leathery wings and acid spit. They swarmed the airships. They clogged the propellers. They tore through the canvas balloons. The lead airship groaned. Its envelope shredded. It began to fall. "Pull up!" Magath screamed. "Get us out of here!" "We are trapped," the helmsman shouted. "They are everywhere." Zeke made a choice. He grabbed a parachute. "I'm going down." He jumped. He transformed in mid-air. The beast Titan landed with a crash that shook the earth. He picked up a handful of rocks and crushed them into gravel. He wound up his long arms and threw. The shotgun blast of stone shredded a wave of gargoyles. But then he felt it. The shadow in the warp. The hive mind turned its attention to him. He was the strongest prey. On the walls of Mitras, Titus rallied the defense. The scouts were manning the cannons. The Space Marines stood at the vanguard. "They are coming," Titus said. The horizon was a moving carpet of chitin, and amidst them walked the nightmares. A hive tyrant towered over the swarm. It was directing the traffic. It saw the walls. It saw the biomass inside. And behind the Tyranids came the surviving Titans from the Marleyan drop, running in terror. "Open fire," Erwin commanded. The cannons roared. Grapeshot tore into the Tyranid front line. It was like shooting the ocean. Titus checked his ammunition. He had a chainsword and a combat knife. He had his hatred. "For Makraga," Titus roared. He jumped from the wall. The Space Marines followed. They did not wait for the siege. They met the charge. Titus landed on a Carnifex. He drove his chainsword into its skull. The blade jammed on the thick bone. The Carnifex thrashed, throwing him off. Titus rolled, coming up with his knife. He stabbed the creature in the eye. Acid blood sprayed his armor, hissing against the ceramite. The battle was a chaotic, swirling melee. The scouts used their ODM gear to engage the larger Tyranids, trying to find weak points. But the Tyranids adapted. A warrior-strained Tyranid saw Levi Ackerman swinging. It waited. As she came in, it extended a whip limb, knocking her from the air. She crashed into the mud. Levi was there in an instant. He spun, slicing the warrior's head off. "They learn," Levi shouted. "They learn how we fight. We need the coordinate," Titus shouted over the vox. "Where is Yeager?" Eren was on the wall. He was paralyzed. The psychic pressure of the hive mind was crushing him. He could hear the hunger. It drowned out everything else. "Eren!" Historia screamed, shaking him. "Do something!" Eren looked at her. He looked at the slaughter. He saw Zeke the Beast Titan fighting back to back with a Space Marine. The absurdity of it broke his paralysis. "The enemy of my enemy is my meat shield." Eren screamed. He bit his hand. The attack Titan appeared, but he did not charge the Tyranids. He turned to the wall. "The wall tightens," Titus said, realizing the plan. "He is going to wake them." "No," Hank shouted. "If he wakes them, they will flatten the earth." "Not the earth," Titus said. "The swarm." Eren roared. It was a sound that transcended sound. It was a command written in the genetic code of the Eldian race. The wall Sinar cracked. The stone fell away. The face of a colossal titan appeared. Then another, and another. Millions of them. But Eren did not command them to march forward. He commanded them to form a circle. He commanded them to look outward. The wall titans stepped out of their foundations. The earth shook so violently that the Tyranids lost their footing. The colossal titans raised their feet. They did not walk. They stomped. It was a hydraulic press of flesh. The wall titans synchronized their movements. They created a kill zone. Any Tyranid that entered the perimeter was flattened. The steam they emitted was superheated, cooking the spores in the air. The rumbling had begun, but it was a defensive rumbling. Zeke saw the wall titans moving. He laughed. a manic, terrified laugh. He's actually doing it. He is saving us. But the Tyranids were not defeated. They were biological machines. The hive tyrant saw the Colossals. It screeched a command. The swarm shifted tactics. They stopped charging. They began to vomit digestive acid at the Colossals' feet. They began to eat the heels of the giants. The Colossals toppled. As soon as they fell, the swarm covered them, stripping the flesh from the bone in seconds. The biomass intake fueled a rapid evolution. From the backlines a new horror emerged. It was a bio-titan, a hierophant. It was massive, towering over even the Colossals. It stood on 4 legs spiked and chitinous. It fired bio-cannons that shot acid spores. The hierophant fired. The acid hit a colossal titan in the chest. The titan dissolved, melting into a puddle of slush. Titus watched the escalation. The Tyranids were winning the attrition war. They were eating the defense. "We have lost," Titus said. Then the sky turned green. It was not the green of the Tyranid blood. It was the green of lightning. High above the moon, the Necron tomb ship had fully awakened. The cryptech overseeing the system had observed the biological infestation. The logic was simple. The planet was compromised. The Tyranids were a threat to the Silent King's eventual return. The solution was sterilization. A beam of emerald energy descended from the heavens. It did not hit the Tyranids. It hit the Marleyan fleet remnants. The airships vaporized. The beams swept across the horizon. It carved a trench through the Tyranid swarm. The Necrons had arrived, but they were not allies. Monoliths teleported onto the battlefield, black pyramids floating silently. Their Gauss flux arcs lashed out, disintegrating Tyranids and humans alike. A scout flew too close to a monolith. He was flayed atom by atom, his body turning to green dust. "It is a 3-way war," Owen said, watching from the wall. "We are caught between the Devourer and the Destroyer." Titus looked at the battlefield. The Hierophant was charging a monolith. The monolith fired its particle whip. The Bio-Titan screamed as its carapace was stripped away. "We have one chance," Titus said. He looked at Eren, who was still in Titan form controlling the Wall Titans. "He has to focus," the rumbling Titus said. "Focus it?" Armin asked. "He has to send them all," Titus said. "Not a circle, a spear. He has to drive the Wall Titans into the center of the Tyranid swarm. He has to feed them to the Tyranids." "What?" Armin was horrified. "Why?" "To group them," Titus said. "If the Tyranids swarm the Titans, they will be concentrated. And then we detonate the icy burst mines underneath them." "The mines?" Hange asked. "Magos Vetius and I rigged the outer district," Titus said. "We turned the entire sector into a bomb. We just need the bait." Titus activated his jump pack. He flew toward Eren's Titan. He landed on the nose. "Yeager," Titus shouted. "Drive them into the sector. Feed them to the beast." Eren heard him. The attack Titan looked at the Space Marine. Eren understood. It was a gamble. Sacrifice the Wall Titans to lure the enemy into a trap. Eren roared the command. The Wall Titans broke their circle. They marched straight into the maw of the Hive fleet. The Tyranids took the bait. The sheer amount of biomass was irresistible. The swarm converged. Even the Hierophant turned to feast. The Necrons, seeing the biological concentration, paused. Their logic subroutines calculated that the biologicals were destroying themselves. They held fire to conserve energy. The Wall Titans walked into the trap. The Tyranids covered them. It was a mountain of writhing flesh and chitin. "Now!" Titus screamed into the Vox. Magos Vetius, at the central control in the Trost headquarters, slammed his mechadendrite into the activation rune. The underground gas reserves of the iceburst stone, which had been pressurized to critical levels, were ignited. The explosion was not fire. It was pure kinetic expansion. The earth ruptured. The shockwave shattered the bedrock. The mountain of Tyranids and Titans was blasted upward. The gas sublimated, instantly freezing and then shattering the biomass. Millions of Tyranids died in a single heartbeat. The Hierophant was torn apart by the pressure. The hive tyrant was crushed. The connection to the hive mind was severed. The remaining Tyranids went feral. Without direction, they were easy prey for the Necron Gauss flares and the remaining defenders. But the cost was absolute. The wall titans were gone. The defense of Paradis was spent. The Necron monoliths hovered over the crater. They scanned for life. They found the Space Marines. They found the Eldians. Titus stood on the shattered remains of the wall. He faced the monoliths. He held his empty bolter. He waited for the green beam. But the beam did not come. The sky tore open. Real space screamed. The warp rift that Vettius had opened had attracted more than Tyranids. It had attracted the Indomitus Crusade. A battle barge of the Ultramarines translated from the warp. It was colossal, a flying city of Gothic cathedrals and gun batteries. It was the Macrugger's honor. Robert Gilliman had come. The Primarch's ship opened fire, not on the planet, on the Necron tomb ship. The macro cannons pounded the moon, the Necrons calculating the threat level as unwinnable against a glorious Gloriana-class vessel phased out. The monoliths vanished. The battlefield was silent. Titus fell to his knees. He was exhausted. He had fought Titans. He had fought Tyranids. He had fought the despair of a doomed world. Thunderhawks descended from the clouds. They were blue and gold. They brought reinforcements. Eren Yeager emerged from his Titan form. He was steaming. He had no limbs. He had regenerated too many times. Makasa held him. They looked up at the giants descending from the sky. Are they like you? Eren whispered to Titus. No, Titus said, standing up. He looked at the banner of the Ultramarines. They are better. The Primarch Robut. Gilliman landed. He was a demigod clad in the armor of fate. He towered over everyone. He looked at the carnage. He looked at the dead Tyranids. He looked at the strange biological residue of the Titans. He looked at Captain Titus. Report Captain Gilliman said. His voice was the sound of tectonic plates shifting. Mission accomplished, Lord Commander Titus said. The planet is compliant. The Xenos threat is neutralized. Gilliman looked at the Eldians. He looked at their fear. He looked at the strange technology they wielded. And these? Gilliman asked, gesturing to Eren and the scouts. They are the indigenous population, Titus said. They are abhuman. They possess a stable mutation that allows for biological gigantism. Gilliman looked at Eren. He saw the danger. He saw the potential. Are they loyal? Gilliman asked. Titus looked at Erwin. He looked at Levi. He looked at Eren. They fight, Titus said. Then they are useful, Gilliman said. He turned to his equerry. Prepare the induction protocols. We will integrate this world into the Ultramar realm. The Titan technology will be analyzed by the Mechanicus. The population will be tithed. Tithed? Historia asked, stepping forward. She was queen, but she trembled before the Primarch. What does that mean? It means, Gilliman said, looking down at her, that you have a debt to pay. We saved your world. Now your world belongs to the Imperium. Your sons will fight in our armies. Your daughters will work in our factories. You will feed the war machine. But we are free, Eren whispered. Gilliman knelt. He looked Eren in the eye. There is no freedom in this galaxy, boy. There is only the war. You have a choice. You can die here as a free meal for the Tyranids, or you can live as a servant of the Emperor. Eren looked at the sky. It was filled with Imperial ships. The wars were gone. The Titans were gone. The world he knew was gone. I choose, Eren said, his voice cracking. "I choose to kill the enemy." Good Gilliman said, standing up. He signaled the fleet. "Begin the uplift. Fortify this system. I want a fortress world here within the year." The camera pulled back. The island of Paradis was no longer an isolated cage. It was a construction site. Imperial cathedrals were rising over the ruins of Shiganshina. The Aquila was painted on the remaining walls. The Titans were gone. In their place marched the Astra Militarum, and in the front ranks, wearing flak armor over their survey corps cloaks, were the Eldians. They carried laser guns. They looked dead inside, but they were alive. This concluded with the survival of the species at the cost of their soul. The unavoidable offer was accepted. The collision was resolved not with a bang, but with a signature on an administrative form. The nightmare of the Titans was over. The nightmare of the 41st millennium had just begun. The year is 045.M42 by the imperial calendar, though the local records still struggle to align with the standard Terran dating system. The planet formerly known as Paradis is now designated Fortress World 99 Zeta. The sky is no longer blue. It is a perpetual bruise of grey smog and promethium exhaust pumped from the forest of giant trees, which has been converted into a strip mining operation for bioreactive lumber. The air tastes of sulfur and incense. High Logis Armin Arlad sits in his sanctum within the spire that was once the headquarters of the Survey Corps. His back is bent. His skin is like parchment. He breathes with the aid of a brass respirator implant, a gift from the Mechanicus for his service in cataloguing the genetic history of the population. He looks out the reinforced transparent steel window. He does not see the walls. The walls were dismantled decades ago, their material ground down to make concrete for the bunkers, or harvested by the tech priest to study the hardening properties. In their place stand the macro cannons. The planetary defense grid is a bristling forest of steel that points endlessly at the stars. Below in the staging grounds, the 88th Yeagerian Abhuman Auxilia is mustering. 10,000 young men and women stand in perfect rows. They wear the flak armor of the Astra Militarum, but over their shoulders they still wear the green cloaks. The cloaks are ragged, stained with the oil of laser guns. They are not waiting to reclaim land. They are waiting for the dropships. They are being tithed. The Departamento Munitorum requires 50 regiments a year from this world. The Eldian physiology with its high adrenaline response and durability makes them excellent shock troops for the meat grinders of the Octarius sector. Armin watches them. He wonders if they know what they are fighting for. They sing hymns to the god emperor, whom they conflate with the ancient founder Ymir. The ecclesiarchy has been efficient. They rewrote the history books. There were no titans. There were only demons, and the emperor's angels drove them back. The ability to shift is now a sanctioned mutation, a holy burden borne only by the penitents. He thinks of Eren. Eren is not dead, but he is not here. The asset known as the attack pattern bioengine was requisitioned by the Ordo Xenos 3 decades ago. He is kept in a stasis vault on a black ship, thawed out only when the Imperium needs to break a fortress that no orbital bombardment can crack. Armin received a report once from a scribe in the Segmentum Pacificus. It detailed a green giant tearing apart an orc gargant. The report noted that the weapon screamed the entire time. It screamed about freedom while it served as the ultimate slave. Mikasa Ackerman is gone. She died 10 years ago, not in battle, but in the silence of her home. She refused the juvenile treatments offered by the planetary governor. She sat on her porch watching the pollution choke the sunset, clutching a red scarf until her heart simply stopped. She was the last person who remembered the old world with clarity. The door to Armin's office opens. A young scribe enters. He carries a slate. "My lord," the scribe says, "the tithe is ready. The ships are asking for the final manifest." Armin signs the slate. His hand shakes. He is signing the death warrants of 10,000 children. He has done this 40 times. Do they have enough rations? Armin asks a question he asks every year. The scribe shrugs. "Standard allocation, my lord. Corpse starch and nutrient paste. It is enough to reach the war zone." Armin nods. It is never enough. He looks back at the window. A Thunderhawk gunship roars past, its engines screaming. It is painted in the blue and gold of the Ultramarines. A permanent garrison remains on the world, not to protect the people, but to guard the gate. The rift is still there, a scar in the sky. The Necrons are still silent on the moon, waiting for the biologicals to falter. The world is safe. The Titans are gone. The people are fed. But as Armin looks at the endless rows of soldiers marching into the belly of the transport ships, he realizes the terrible truth that Captain Titus had tried to explain to him on that final day. The walls were not a prison. They were a cradle. And now the cradle is overturned and the children have been thrown into the dark. Armin turns off the light in his office. He touches the shell of a sea snail that sits on his desk, a relic of a dream about an ocean of salt. The ocean is there, but it is covered in oil rigs and void shield generators. There is no freedom, Armin whispers to the empty room. There is only the Emperor. He closes his eyes. Outside, the sirens wail, signaling the shift change in the manufactorum. The work continues. The war continues. And in the grim darkness of the far future, the only thing that remains of the Survey Corps is the willingness to die for a cause they do not understand. The record ends here.